On the Rec Yard, Women's Prison Podcast, where we are live on the Rec Yard every Wednesday night. Hey, everybody. We are on the Rec Yard, Women's Prison Podcast. I'm Marci Marie.
I'm Toonchi.
Toonchi. Toonchi is tuning in tonight from the Patrick O'Daniel unit in her prison cell.
I mean, really, y'all, you know, I've told everybody I got this fancy app to be able to put up backgrounds because you gave me a hard time about it when I moved my computer. And so I was like, well, let me get some cool backgrounds. And it freezes my camera up. It makes it lag. So here we are, bare bones.
I feel like you could just get you something cute to hang right behind you for when you record. And when you're not, if you don't want it in your apartment, you could just take it down.
Well, I mean, that is a good idea. I don't know Taylor Swift and a picture of my cat.
That would be accurate. We see y'all coming in, and we are so happy to be on the Rec Yard tonight. We're both stressy. Toonch and I are stressy today, and so we are really glad to be here where we don't have to be stressed with our favorite people. We always love Wednesday nights, and we appreciate when you all comment and like, share, all of those good things. If you're watching us right now on your cell phone, tap that screen several times for us. If you are listening wherever you hear your favorite podcasts, please do leave us a review, and we would appreciate that so much. That helps On the Rec Yard Women's Prison Podcast reach an even broader audience. Don't keep us to ourselves, y'all. To yourselves. Yeah, that too.
Well, I am happy to be here. You know, last week I was not well when Marci told everybody that I had texted her and said that I was laying naked on the floor. Much better this evening, and but still, just too much information. I'm in that perimenopausal stage where hormones. I feel like I'm 14 again. I remember being that age, Marci, when all our hormones change. It's like it's happening to me all over again. I just feel full of anxiety and anger over nothing. And I have to tell myself, Jennifer, calm down. Why are you getting so worked up? It's hormones.
Well, baby, it's rec night, so you got to just chill out and enjoy rec, and it's all going to be good. And I hope that I don't have to go through that someday when I'm old like you.
Ma'am, we're the same age. I just happened to get there first, I guess, but we'll all know it because let me tell you something. Now I've been around you when you're hormonal. Whew, it is frightening.
That is enough. Stop telling the people you're scared of us or scared of me and us. Well, the people up here. Stop. Yeah. Stop. Y'all, we have a good show tonight. We have a real show with a real topic, not just all of this stuff that's going on right now. We are going to be talking about the death penalty in Texas prisons and in general. We have an expert coming on the show, Miss Tiara Cooper, and she is with the Texas Abolished the Death Penalty. She's going to tell you the exact right, and Toonch is probably looking it up for me right now because you're amazing like that. But she's with an organization that advocates strongly to abolish the death penalty in Texas. I met her for the first time at a conference. Her organization hosted a conference in Fort Worth, and several of us were in attendance. We learned a lot about the actual laws and policies, and we learned. I went to a session on junk science and how science that used to be reputable has now, a lot of those things have been debunked, and man, it's going to be a good show. The Texas Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty. Thank you. They deserve all the respect. So
she's their deputy director.
Yes, yeah, and she's been rocking it with them for a little while, so she's gonna be hopping on in just a moment, and, we also I see you, AIC's advocate about the hurricanes in Florida, and, yeah, we're gonna talk about that too, for sure. Before we get to that, let's do this right quick. Let's do a weekly recap. Tunch, what has been going on?
What
I
has been going on?
Yeah. Well, I was in Minneapolis this last week, and so that was fun. The Right Cause Urban Youth Conservation invited me to an advocacy day in northern Minneapolis. They hosted it, and it was a great event. Tunch, I was in a room full of our people, formerly incarcerated, system impacted folks. And man, it was really inspiring. We were advocating, teaching advocacy. So they did a session like how to use Chat GPT for a letter writing campaign. And we actually, everybody in the room did it on the spot and emailed our letters right there. And so that was really incredible. I felt like it was impactful. We were talking about a couple of gentlemen, Marcus Brown and don't let me get his name wrong, Terry Pettis, and they have just over sentenced at a young age, and it's time for both of those gentlemen to be home. So we were talking about their cases. We actually had both of them on the phone, one of them on a video call, which was incredible. And yeah, I got a little award, Tunch.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, it was really exciting, and I didn't expect it. And my mom was there, so that was fun, that she got to see. So it was my mom and Brittany, and my mother's sister lives up there, so we got to visit with, her afterwards. We spent a couple days with my aunt, my cousins. I saw the Northern Lights.
I
Uh,
saw those pictures too, that very romantic picture of the silhouette of you and Brittany
well,
against.
let me tell you something. My cute little niece, who is just a little Barbie doll with brown hair, she and her hubby took the cutest little silhouette, and it was like her arm was around his neck and she had her little leg tossed up like the movies, and you could just see the shadows of them in with all these beautiful display of nature, the northern lights going wild behind them. And so we tried to replicate it and we couldn't. Girl, we couldn't do it. My poor aunt, I was making her get on her knees. You know how I am when I put a camera in somebody's
I
hand
know.
with
Bless
instructions.
her heart.
So she got a taste of that. But yeah, it was really fun. We hung out at Lake Superior, at North Shore, and we rode a gondola, which is like one of those trams that go up and down the Moose Mountain. So yeah, it was nice. And now it's back to reality here.
Back to work. It's put in our group chat text something like, well, I will just be working a half day today because I'm doing this and this. And I'm just like, I have I have things that I need you to do. I need you to get on back here and get settled.
Yeah, I hardly ever say I'm not really working today because no matter where I'm at, I can usually figure out how to get quite a bit of work done actually. But I really just wanted to focus in with my family. And I was there trying to focus in, and I my one of the production deals that I have going on, there was a minor crisis, and so I'm, like, FaceTiming Rosie O'Donnell, and my aunt got to see her, so that was fun, but also, like, I still even with all of that, that I was able to kind of check out, I had to address some things there, and so I didn't actually get a full day off ever, but it was still lots of fun.
Well, good. I'm glad that y'all had that time, and Brittany was able to go, and your mom, and that was really great of the rights. That was really an unexpected award, and well deserved.
Well, thank you for that. That's the Right Cause Urban Youth Conservation. They are doing really good things in our community, in nationwide, but their home base is near Dallas. So big shout out to them. We see y'all in the chat. Shaquille Oatmeal, you've been rocking it with us for a while. I see Natalie, who I got to meet. We got both got to meet in person at our recent Houston event. I see Sade Wright. Um, thank you. Thank you so much. And she says, we are exhausted and she's not working till Monday. And good for you. Good for you. Yeah. So lots of fun. How was your weekend?
Well, I watched the Cub. I watched the Cubs Saturday morning. Then Mandy watched her in the evening. Um, I love that baby. I love her so much. And then Sunday, I do what I like to do, y'all. I love to put on a horror movie and clean. Gosh, it's the most relaxing thing. Anytime I feel stressed, like I was going to stop what I was doing earlier and just start cleaning. And
You
it's
know, I
awful
know.
to be.
I know people in the free world do that, but that's also very much a prison coping skill.
Yes, it relaxes my anxieties, and I like to spend Sundays. That's my actual decompressing is cleaning. I'll make a little something to eat. It's not always horror movies, you guys. Put on Fatal Attraction. It's one of my favorite movies. And I'm just thinking all the ways she could have done that differently and been the hero in the end. But and then we went this week. Was it Monday? We went to a screening, The Box. It was about a man who'd been in Texas solitary confinement for 30 something years, 3 decades, something like that. And very impactful film. It was at the UT Law Center. Chanel, who is our director of programs at Linus, was on the panel. It was such a great discussion. It was pretty full. You know how hard it is to get people to community events, and that whole stadium seating in a lecture room was full. And then we left there and came over here to a candidate forum near my apartment. Me and Mandy and Chanel and the baby, Nay, and we just had a really good time together. I love when I'm just with my people. You know what I mean? And it
Yeah.
was just really great.
I heard from so many different people that that panel went really well, and I just want to note that the film, was produced by, um, Jeremy Young, and it was called The Box, 27 Years in Solitary. And then I also want to just say on that note, we know lots of people in solitary right now in Texas that have been in for that many years or more. That's not unusual. That's not, it sounds shocking and it should be shocking. It should be. But for those of us who have been in the system and on units where they house solitary confinement long term, we know there are people in there for decades, quite literally. Yeah, so that's a whole nother episode, right? Tonight we are talking about the death penalty, specifically in Texas. We do have a guest. She's going to be here shortly. She had to finish up something else, Tiara Cooper, and we're excited for that. There is actually an execution scheduled. Um, First, I wanted to talk about Marcellus Williams. Did you follow his case at all?
I don't know if I did. I don't remember.
I want to pull him up, but he recently got executed, not in Texas. Um, with DNA evidence, there was new DNA evidence proving his innocence. And there was a huge campaign by the Innocence Project to try to get his execution stopped. And I'm going to pull it up, and I bet AIC's advocate who's watching is probably going to beat me to it because he always does. But yeah, it was a huge, I mean, they murdered a man. Not only did they murder a man, but they murdered a man who there was evidence out here in the world proving that he did not do what they accused him of doing. And I think that's something that, uh, that happens. we were locked up with people that their cases got overturned or that they got out. They were innocent.
Yeah.
Testimonies changed, evidence came forward, people came forward, new evidence came forward, and that happens. That's something that happens uh, when you execute someone. That's irreversible.
Right. Well, and I think of Pam Perillo. We should have her on here one day. And if you'd like to hear the interview I did with her, it's on my YouTube page. She had two close calls. Like, I think one, she was a day before or 3 days before execution when they stayed her, and eventually they overturned her death sentence and resentenced her to life. And then eventually, it took a while after that, but she made parole. And like, I say Pam is a survivor. She escaped death row. That doesn't happen very often. And you know, thinking of women on death row, there's 7 women on death row and about 52 women on death row in the country, which far it doesn't compare to how many men are on death row. And it seems to be a little bit more of a hesitancy to sentence women to death, even though women are often disproportionately sentenced in other ways, especially for capital crimes and murder, especially when there's planning involved. And a lot of times we know women that were in domestic violence, they didn't fight back with their accuser right then. They waited till he was asleep. So there it looks very premeditated and that kind of stuff. So they'll get sentenced to a bigger time a lot of times than men. But certainly, it's not as many women on death row, but I always feel like they get lost in the conversation when we talk about death row.
No, you're absolutely right. In the criminal legal system in general, we kind of take a back seat, and we are significantly outnumbered by our male counterparts. However, I mean, we have 9,000 women incarcerated in Texas state prisons, and yes, that's only a fraction of the total in comparison to who the number housed on men's prisons. But 9,000 is still worth, 9,000 is still a number. It's
Yeah.
still a
And
lot of
and
people.
those 7 women on Texas death row, that's 7 too many. And so
Yeah.
when I'm in death penalty spaces, I'm always like, well, I haven't heard anything about women. And a lot of times you don't hear stuff about people who are guilty, right? Like sometimes there's a tendency to only talk about death penalty in terms of innocence. And we're talking about ending the death penalty, period, um, for everyone. Well, I think our guest is here.
She is. I was just seeing her in our virtual waiting room right here. I was kind of sorry about that. I looked up Marcellus Williams' case. He was out of Missouri, and I hit the play button on the CBS news channel that came up when I searched him up. Um, but yeah, he was out of Missouri, and that's what there was the actual weapon in his case that was used to take someone's life. The DNA that was found on that knife, they had thought it to be his, and it was proven not to be his. And the state of Missouri decided to murder him anyway. Despite that, I do want to get our guest on here because she is the real expert in the room. So let's hop her on. Hi, Tiara. How are you?
Hey y'all, I'm going. I'm
Yeah,
going. I'm going. How are you all tonight?
we're
Good,
wonderful.
good.
We know
Uh,
that you were busy, and so I'm so grateful that you still made time for us tonight. And we are definitely super excited and grateful to have you on the show. Welcome to On the Rec Yard.
hey y'all, I'm excited to be here. I heard a lot of what you all were naming and just excellently laid out like some of the questions and curiosities around like the death row is population and women at the center of capital punishment, death row, even in cases where there is no innocence, where it isn't an innocence claim, where it's, you know, um, it's pretty obvious. So just thank y'all for starting with some of those
Yeah.
like curiosities and just understandings around capital punishment. For those who don't know, my name is Tiara Cooper. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the deputy director of the Texas Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty. And it's really just a passion work for me, you know. I've been community organizing for years now, since I was 25. I'm formerly incarcerated. So when I came home, I literally just picked up organizing. I won't make it seem as though I was just like, oh, look, I didn't even know the language of organizing. So let me be for real. I started off doing electoral work simply because someone said, can you read a script? And I said, okay. And so I just wanted to give a little background knowledge that I don't think you just wake up one day and you're like, death penalty, sign me up. Um, Slowly but surely, there's been like a breaking up of the fallow ground in Texas, where we've been confronted with this old Texas law
Mm,
in present Texas, like what Texans actually want,
mm-hmm.
what Texans actually need, and what Texans actually deserve. And I believe we can envision a world, a Texas, without death row.
I believe so too. And I want to touch a little bit on what you said. Like you didn't like get out of prison or even maybe prior to your incarceration, just be anti-death penalty, right?
No, I don't even think I was an abolitionist. Like I work from an abolitionist framework. I consider myself an abolitionist. I don't think I had that framework or analysis of the system. I grew up knowing F the police. I never felt safe. I knew the realities, but yet I still reserved places in my heart and in the system for certain structures. And it wasn't until I really just sat with them and like, what benefit do we have from this? And really, my moral stances as well. I mean, it's so many different facts around capital punishment. I mean, from the millions we spend just to execute one person, like it's fiscally irresponsible to execute in the state of Texas, like just any state. It's just fiscally irresponsible. On no channel does it feel like this is something we should be doing. Does it make sense for us to be doing, etc.
So I love you saying that, and I'm curious. You know, as you do your advocacy and your organization does your advocacy around the death penalty, how do we move those old school Texans who have this old understanding of justice? How do you move them along the scale to help them understand that the death penalty is something that we should do away with? What are the strategies that you have seen work with those hardcore, tough on crime, and some crimes deserve to be, you know,
Yeah.
all the horrible things that we hear. We've got old Sparky on display at the prison museum, and T-shirts. I survived old Sparky, and it's this really disgusting idea that that somehow the death penalty is a deterrent, which we know it's not, right? So, what are the ways that we as advocates and community members move people along towards abolishing the death penalty?
Well, with conservatives, I would kind of group like conservative Texans, tough on crime Texans in one like group. And you really just want to connect with their values is what I'm learning. I won't act like I'm the expert that is in like my specific demographic, but I do the work and I learn a lot from my colleagues, Kristen, who is my executive director, as well as Nan Tolson. She's with the Conservatives Concerned, which is a group based in Texas. Well, they're national, but she's the Texas representative, and she teaches us a whole lot about like how to work with conservatives. And the entry points that I see that really work is the cost. Like they're going to connect with like their pockets. I mean, it is 3 times higher to execute someone than to give them life without the possibility of parole. And that cost typically includes like the jury selection process, legal representation, mitigation, and numerous appeals. You got to understand, like these people go through numerous appeals. These things are costly. Like these appeals just in general, they're very costly, where you're getting into like the millions, literally 2.3 million versus 750,000 is what it costs for a person to spend life without the possibility of parole in the state of Texas. So it's cost. That's one thing. Another reality is that over 200 people have spent time on death row have been exonerated. And if you know, we get it wrong. And by we, I mean the United States. The courts get it wrong far too often. Those are 200 innocent lives that we know of. I feel the need to say that we know of. And it's so necessary to name that tough on crime rhetoric. You know, it sounds good, but in reality, we have a deeply flawed by design criminal legal system that doesn't work the way we believe it works in theory. The same way we believe about so many other systems and structures that just don't complement justice in any way. So the fact that we can get it wrong once, in my opinion, is enough. Not on my watch, not on our watch. That should be the mentality of Texans, is that, and not even just Texans, but across the world. And 23 states have already gotten rid of capital punishment. So there are already folks living in our reality who know that this isn't a crime deterrent. This doesn't save people. It doesn't keep people safer. So why are we doing this? We shouldn't be doing this. So it's Texans. It's a real reality that we have to face and really get loud about. Because I think it's one of those things too, where we did a poll in Dallas, and we got like about 75% response rate. If there was like, when the question is posed around life without parole or capital punishment, 75% of Dallas residents said that they were for life without parole when you ask the question that way. However, if you ask the question just like, do you believe in the death penalty, you'll get a response for that too. But when you give folks alternatives, so alternatives are so necessary when having real conversations about capital punishment. You also want to mention the victims. I think people think because we're abolitionists that we are inconsiderate of victims. No, we actually center the victims. We actually work oftentimes alongside victim families. You all just witnessed in Khalifa's case out in St. Louis, Missouri. The family didn't want this. They believed his innocence. This happens nonstop, even in Robert's case, where there is no victim because no crime was committed. And so who's calling for this death? It's the state, and it's coming from an aspect of control, not even of revenge, not even of retribution, because the families don't even want this. So you're telling the families what they want. You're telling the families what they need. And I think that's also what people have to face, is that not every family, especially when you get dragged to court 20 years later, 10 years later, this is horrific for families too. They typically draw a line where they're like, you know what, lock them up for life. You know, that happens a lot more often than what people expect, because you think out of sight, out of mind. This person did this heinous crime. They need to go down. It's 20 years later. That person that committed this crime has changed their whole life around. They're not the same person. And oftentimes they're remorseful, or we're wrestling with a case of innocence. So it's like, we shouldn't be executed in the state of Texas, especially when there are victims who advocate, when there are detectives who advocate and say, we got it wrong.
I want to thank you for that, first of all. Already so much valuable insight. I wanted to bring up the mental health aspect of people that are incarcerated on death row, and we know of some. And let me stop right there and say that is do we use that as language? Do we say death row still? Because I remember at the conference.
Conference, life.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't want to, I don't want to address that if that's not how we should be addressing that. But what I'm saying is I watched a lot of documentaries about the mental health concerns of someone being housed with a death sentence, how they're housed. But not only that, in Texas, we have people that have death penalties convictions, and are self-mutilating very harshly, like, obviously very deep mental health illnesses. And what are you seeing on that aspect? And also, I mean, what we know is the criminal legal system,
Mm-hmm.
it harshly punishes marginalized communities, especially Black and brown people, especially those in poverty, and
Mm-hmm.
especially those with mental health issues. And just what is the comparison then for those that end up getting death sentences?
I'm glad you mentioned mental illness. I really feel just convicted in that area currently because of Robert's case. He's an autistic man on Texas death row. But I'll even take you to a year ago. We around this time we were advocating for a black man by the name of Andre Thomas, and Andre Thomas is severely mentally ill. He tried to pluck out his own eye
Yep.
based off of reading scripture, and they they did not deem him unfit for trial or to be executed. So there was this argument around competency. And as we know, like you said, different socioeconomic communities or communities that are impoverished, Black, brown, he resided in that population. He was incubated in that population. And as a result, you become, a product of that environment. So we're now finding ourselves in situations where mental illnesses and mental health are being criminalized. And we see it nonstop. And we see that even within county jails, we see it in the prison population, but it makes its way all the way up to capital punishment, to death row, where they're killing a person who doesn't even know what's happening. Who oftentimes we see some of our clients, some of the families we representing are organizing around. They represent themselves on trial. They don't have all their, their minds. And to make matters worse, they've been deteriorating on Texas's death row. These death making institutions are real and they come with dire consequences just as is. So we're not going to also make life without parole be like this. Oh, that's soft on crime. No, being in a prison for life is no soft anything. So I feel the need to name that too, because like when we speak our terms, they're like, no, like as if prison is this cakewalk, especially death row. Um, but severe mental illness is so real at the intersection of mass incarceration. It's something that we're starting to have more conversation, as you see, like in the realm around. Um, but it shows up, like I said, in our cases, especially that make it up to debt to the capital um, level far too often, where you can tell in those original phases, in those earlier phases, they were not, the medical staff were not um, actively like, what do when you're doing like the questionnaires and surveying for responses, they were not doing those things effectively. I think in Robert's case, it's even more clear where he has been on the spectrum, but it took for him to get incarcerated. It took for him to actually have insurance. You talk about people who are on Medicaid their whole lives, who, don't really see clinicians based off their mental health for whatever reasons, just due to poverty and so many other causes. So you get in prison and now you're finally actually having like medical officials who are like, we have to get this looked at. We have to get you looked at. I think with Robert, people have always named that he has like a Forrest Gump quality. You'll hear his friends say that, like he has a Forrest Gump quality. If you watch him during the trial, you will see how he's always responded. So it's sad and it's sickening to think that it took years and years for him to now have the diagnosis of autism, when he's been autistic his whole life. His high school friends and middle school friends all knew him to suffer from autism. And I mentioned Robert Roberson because he's scheduled for execution next week. And Robert's case is very thick in the sense of like so many errors, so many windows where you can see a mistrial of justice. Um, as it relates to autism, though, it's severely highlighted because in the original arrest, he took his daughter Nikki to the emergency room. She had been suffering from pneumonia for weeks. Had went to 47 doctor's appointments like almost consecutively. Was prescribed medicine that you can't even give a 2-year old anymore. So she has this long, comprehensive medical history. Nikki does. So she's a sickly child. And he brings her into the emergency room, and she's turning blue, turning pale, and he's not responding. I'm bringing this up because when you're not responding in a specific way, and this is what I mean by criminalizing mental illness, people with on the spectrum, because their response isn't the social cue that we expect. They're higher to be their abilities are higher to be criminalized. And so we see that within Robert's case, where then now a CPS worker is contacted. Nikki dies a day later, and it has to be shaken baby syndrome, though there is no bruises, though there was no abuse prior, no one saw anything. It's just, it has to be this. And from that point on, nothing else in his case was speculated. Nothing else. It was already ruled from day one because of his lack of response.
Yeah, and you bring that up, and I'm thinking of Melissa Lucio. It was,
Mm-hmm.
especially in her case. You saw all the systems that were supposed to be there to help families just fail one right after the other, fail her and her family, and the Texas Rangers who were interviewing her, horrible. Like, people can watch the film, The State of Texas versus Melissa Lucio, and you can see her being interrogated, in the early morning hours after her child has just died. She herself was pregnant at that time, and you see a woman shutting down. Those of us with trauma and mental illness can, oh, she's totally dissociating right now. Like that, you've got this male figure who's over you, and she just like, oh, she's not behaving the way that society says a mom should be behaving in this situation, right? But she is certainly behaving the way her mental health disorder, the way her trauma response is. And like you said, for people with autism and intellectual disabilities, their responses are not what are there has to be an understanding of a person's history and condition, and there's not. And a lot of times folks first touch of the system, with mental health or intellectual disabilities, is when crisis happens. They've lived their whole life not being diagnosed, and then my own life, rural East Texas, no mental health care, total stigma around that. Well, suddenly there's this crisis that's been building, and I don't have the responses people think I should. And that was my first touch with the system, understanding I had a mental health disorder.
Mm.
And you're right, mental health is completely criminalized in our state, in our country. And it just kind of, like you said, this is state sanctioned violence, y'all. And if y'all don't feel funny as tax-paying citizens, or you don't feel weird or guilty or ashamed that this blood is on all of our hands, right? So then you need to look at why you feel okay letting an intellectually disabled man die on death row who is probably innocent. And it wouldn't matter, quite frankly, to those of us that are abolition. I don't care what they did. I don't know. It's shocking that people are so callous.
I don't think you have to be an abolitionist to oppose the death penalty. Like, I don't think that those two are necessarily the same. Definitely, I'm more of an abolitionist than not. I don't know that I'm fully there yet. But, I don't like what we have going on now. It's not working for sure. But I don't think that you have to be an abolitionist to agree that murder is wrong. and it
I
doesn't
think
matter.
in this context, where I'm naming is like abolition of the death penalty, like in
Mhm.
general, get rid of the death, not abolition of prison institutions. I think that's a longer
Oh,
conversation.
yeah. Yeah,
But
yeah.
like for Texas Coalition to abolish the death penalty, like we're not just like the Innocence Project, which we love the Innocence Project. We work with the Innocence Project very closely. But we also go to work when these are not innocence claims. So I think that's the differential with
Mhm.
like prison abolition and just like death penalty abolition.
Yeah.
And so right now I think we're grounded in death penalty abolition.
At that conference that the Texas Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty hosted in Fort Worth, and I think that was last summer, not even this summer. I'm so confused on where I'm at, in time. But
I heard
they
that.
yeah, they said something that really hit me, and they said it several times, and it was just like what you were saying, Tunch, about this is your tax money. These are your elected officials making these laws, and they are taking people's lives in your name,
Your name. Yeah.
by the state of Texas, the people in the state of Texas, and I'm not okay with that.
Killing in our names, and oftentimes it happens under the radar because America has gotten really great at lynching in private. This is Marcellus Khalifa Williams. That was a public lynching. There's no way you cannot see the intricacies between uh, lynching and now what we consider executions. They've gotten a little bit more crafty with how these things are done. And our community is typically out of the loop. So that's the work of the organizers and community to like, advocate and spread awareness around these cases because like I said, by the time their number comes up, people have forgotten all about this case and you have to remind them about what happened and remind them like where we are with things. And so that's part of the work too, is just, awareness, a whole bunch more awareness, and constantly challenging the system, the system structure. Cause it's really like people are on board. The more you have conversations, you'll notice it's outdated. The capital point, like people are aware, but Texas as a state,
As a
as a body, and death penalty is also looked at as like this uphill battle where it's like this is the state of Texas. Yeah, it's just gonna always. It doesn't have to always be this way.
That's
If
right.
we say it doesn't have to be this way,
Yeah.
if we say they don't need to be killing in our names, they don't. They won't kill in our. They don't need to be killing in our names, and it requires like so much advocacy and it supports. I'm so grateful for you all having me tonight and just showing up to the conference, learning more about the death penalty. I know you all are already aware, but even just coming to share space and the different levels, like people's entry points look so different. And I mean, we have so many different groups and types of people who we disagree on 100 things, but the one thing we agree on is that the death penalty gotta go. And so that always excites me to hear like how others come to their awareness or just like I actually um don't believe that the death penalty should be used anymore. It's something so far like to a degree it feels far because we're in a lot of criminal justice spaces where we're talking about more immediate. I feel it feels more immediate. I'll just say that types of issues within the system, and the death penalty seems further away. But it's like, nope, it's just as important. Nope, we got to have these conversations too. Nope, we have to loop this in. Nope, this is real. That is our neighbor. That is our brother. That is our sister too. And no, we cannot leave nobody behind. And I'm just grateful, really grateful.
Well, we love that you're here tonight, and I see by everybody's comments in the chat, they're real excited to have this conversation too. You're absolutely right. Like these these people are our people. They're our community. I remember working on Melissa Lucio's. I know Melissa. I know Darlie. I know those 7 women on death row, and the thought I remember when we were outside the governor's office and Abe from death penalty action.
Yeah,
He
Abe
said,
Burnley.
yeah, he said, we just got word that we've got to stay. And she was being executed the next day. And I am not, I mean, yes, I'm kind of sensitive. I do cry, but like, this was like the first time in my life, y'all, that I like, it was such a relief. Like, I didn't know I was whole. Like, I could cry thinking about it. Like, they're fixing to kill someone. I know. And I had talked to, my friends at the time saying, I don't know what I'm going to do if we have to go to Huntsville tomorrow. Like, what is this going to be like? Because it's not far away. Like you said, this is home right here. Someone I love and know. And so I'm thinking of the other women that most of us know on death row in Texas. What is that going to be like when that time comes for them? And all it does is traumatize communities and victims and families all over.
It perpetuates the cycle of
Yes.
violence. It perpetuates the cycle of violence. You're absolutely right. I we only have our guest maybe for a few more minutes, and I
Oh
definitely
no,
want.
you got me.
Are you
You got
good?
me.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
She's juggling a lot tonight, and I do want to talk about Robert's case, very specifically the call to action that you might have so that people can get involved. If you wanted to give, you gave some details about the debunked shaken baby syndrome accusation. And we know he's autistic, and we talked about that. But what can we do to stop his? We're asking for a stay, and so what can we do?
Yeah. There's a few things that we can do. We're currently, let me just name, in a process of clemency where we will know. They typically wait to a day before to let us know what the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles stands. We have, that's one avenue, and then the other avenue is to, for one, sign the petition on the innocenceproject.org. There will be a petition delivery early next week. We need as many signatures as we can. We want to boost that number up some more. So like all weekend, we want to just see a circulation of Robert's petition, because we're delivering those directly to the governor's office, and demanding, and asking and pleading for, Robert's life, essentially. You can also make calls, though I'm not pushing that one. As we know, I think at our governor's office, they just take the phone off the hook and let it sit for a while. So we do want to push people more towards petitioning, as well as just like standing in the wings. We'll know early next week what the courts have to say. Um, Post the petitioning piece, we'll see where we are then with how it needs to look to, communicate more directly with the governor, because he'll have the only powers at that hand. Right now, the courts still hold power, and the governor holds power. So we still have a little window, but waiting on some responses. To be real with you, right now it's kind of a waiting period, but we still need as many sign-ons as possible. So I'm gonna push everybody to the innocenceproject.org. You can also go to tcadp.org, and you can sign on to the petition to save Robert Roberson.
Thank you for that. And I'm going to put some of that in the chat so that you all can just click the link. I'm looking for the exact link to get to the petition right now.
Oh, one additional thing, sorry.
Yeah, please.
There is a social media toolkit that everyone should lay eyes on. It is on the innocenceproject.org. It's under, if you go all the way down, you will see a list of actions. You should see them, and you will see a toolkit, and it just has like the slides for like your social media reels. It also has these amazing videos that the New York Times did with Detective Wharton and Robert, having this one-on-one conversation with essentially the guy who got him convicted, apologizing and saying, what can I do? I think it's also necessary to name that Detective Wharton is now a full-time minister, and he says he cannot sleep at night anytime he thinks about Robert, and he's all in for his case and is trying to reverse the harm.
Thank you for that. I found the link and I see you all asking in the chat where we can find that, and I'm going to put it here in the chat, and I'm going to put it on the screen. For those of you that are listening to the podcast, if you go to innocenceproject.org and hit their search engine and put Robert Robertson, Robert Roberson, Roberson, you can pull that up. And that's how I found it, fairly easy. It's in the chat here, and it's on the screen for those of you that are watching from LinkedIn and other platforms that don't allow us to chat with. And that's where you can sign the petition. It's really easy right there on that page. And we are doing a push. We've been asked to sign. If you don't think that the state should be killing people, and then especially in the case of Robert Robertson, where did a crime even happen?
Mm-hmm.
Lots of people don't believe that a crime took place. They believe that a child tragically lost her life, and not at the hands of this gentleman, and so yeah, I think that we should sign, and I'm going to do that. Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
And I want to add too, y'all, as me and Marci have continuously reminded folks here in Texas, our legislative session begins in January. There will be, at least we know, a couple of bills that will be directly related to the death penalty, abolishing the death penalty, making sure. I remember one session when Representative Crockett was still here, and I testified at that hearing about making sure that serious mental illness is included in understanding the process, and making sure that people with serious mental illnesses do not end up on the row. So as time gets closer to that, we will also keep you up to date with the bills and the legislation that will be introduced to end the death penalty here in Texas.
I was gonna name that. I was gonna say
Yeah.
another cause. This legislative session is approaching, and for those that don't know, Robert has garnered support from both Democrats and Republicans, over 100. He has the majority support, and so it's just been wonderful seeing how Rep. Lacey Hull and Rep. Joe Moody, who has always been a prominent defender of capital punishment being abolished, have stepped up and really stood tall against this case. And there's like even images for you all that want to do some research. You can all watch and review some of the media that's come out recently with them praying on death row. Robert is like, this is his first human contact in years, and so it's just like that's also very dehumanizing. But even their report of just like his spirit and how he shows up, I wanted to name that he has support from state house representatives, and there's going to be several bills. There's always a few bills. The severe mental illness bill was one that we really championed around also. So shout out to Rep. Tony Rose, who authored a bill last year, maybe year before. They helped support around Andre's case, and I believe will also get some support this year. TCADP, we also lead a lobby corps program. And if you want to go advocate against the death penalty, we'll have that on our website. It's actually on our website if you would like to apply to join our lobby corps. And that is to be an advocate and ambassador against capital punishment.
Their website is tcadp.org. So www.tcadp, the Texas Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty, TCADP, for those of you that are listening. For those that are watching, it's there at the bottom of your screen. Thank you, Carl Webb, for putting that in the chat. Watching from LinkedIn, we appreciate you so much. We have about 5 minutes left, but I wanted to touch on the life of people living on death row, and what are those conditions like? Tunch and I briefly brought up solitary confinement at the beginning of the show because one of our good friends and co-workers with Lioness was on a panel surrounding solitary confinement in Texas for a gentleman that had been there for 3 decades. So what is the life? Can you just touch on how does their day look when they're incarcerated with a death penalty sentence?
Ooh, their day to day is very, very similar to solitary. I mean, in all of its ways, but even more rigorous. I mean, you don't get time outside. You don't go to chapel. You don't have opportunities to be in community. Um, there are a few folks who are in a faith based pod who get to experience some of those liberties. But if you're not in this pod,
Hmm.
you are isolated. And there's wait lists to be on this faith-based pod. And oftentimes, like a lot of our clients, to be honest with you, they all make it. A lot of them make it to the faith-based pod, and they stay on the faith-based pod until their date. Um, but yeah, there's so much that I can name. I mean, from the medical histories of folks who are on capital punishment over time on death row, their health is deteriorating like crazy, both mental decline, but also physical. Um, ugh, just we have to see these systems as death making institutions because that's exactly what they are. And it's challenging because the alternative to death is life without the possibility of parole. But we do believe in saving the life of a person and maintaining what we can.
Yeah.
Valuing human life is sacred.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you describing them, the conditions, talking about how they don't have contact. Maybe they have a little contact, a little bit more now with each other if they adhere to the faith based, dorm. And, if that's, they shouldn't be, I mean, that shouldn't be part of the requirement. I feel like, at least just having folks in pods, period, to be in community with each other. And, I'm thinking about Representative Jeff Leach, who has moved further along the scale of being a death penalty abolitionist. I know he would never say that word, but he was a strong defender of Melissa Lucio, and through her case began to see the flaws of the death penalty. And something that really shocked him and upset him was that Melissa hadn't been able to touch her kids in God, how many years? There is no contact.
No contact.
So even just, I know that some legislation would have changed the way that we housed people and allowed them to have that human contact. Just whatever ways we can chip away at this, we're going to do. And I'm excited for session, and I agree with you. Just because something has always been this way doesn't mean it has to be, and it doesn't mean that Texas has to be this way forever. I think we tell the women on the inside all the time, well, this is just how it's been. Who said that? I mean, hell, it doesn't have to stay that way, even for Texas. So I hope that we'll see you at session. I'm sure we will.
I'm sure we will.
We'll go to lunch. There's a great spot up the road from the Capitol that I always tell everybody, all right, we're going.
Do you remember what it's called?
It's called the Chicken Bowl.
Period. Let's go to the Chicken Bowl then, because y'all know we be there all night.
Yes.
Yes.
All day.
Yes.
Sign me up. I'm there. And I saw someone ask for my social media. It's my first name, last name, Tiara Cooper, on all social media platforms. I think it's the Tiara Cooper on IG. But yeah, first name, last name.
I put your LinkedIn. That's your LinkedIn link in the chat.
Okay.
And I'm going to put your name here so that people see the correct spelling. Yeah, she's my friend on Facebook, so you can find her in my friends list too.
My favorite Instagram stories. I'd be like, oh, more just
yes,
looking.
yes.
Don't do
Hey,
that now.
no, you show out. You show out on those stories, and I love it. I'm here for it. Yes.
I really
Yeah.
appreciate y'all.
Yeah. Yeah, so, thank you so much again. Any final thoughts? Anything else that you wanna make sure that you share?
Just join the Texas Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty. I mean, go onto our website, sign up for our newsletters, get involved. We tomorrow is World Day Against the Death Penalty, which is so weird. I did not name that. So I'll be a part of several events tomorrow, but we'll have one locally in DFW that will be at not the Margaret Hunt Hill Bridge. Sorry, I'm a couple
That's
of
okay.
places, but you can go onto our website or you can follow me on social media. You can get the exact address and yeah, we'll be at the William Allen Lynching Memorial. So you can go there tomorrow at 1 o'clock. We'll have a vigil. It'll be really powerful. Some phenomenal speakers. We even got some House reps coming down and speaking out against the death penalty and speaking up for Robert Roberson.
Hmm.
I want y'all
Yes.
to say the name Robert Roberson one time out loud. I know I can't hear you, but say Robert Roberson because I just believe when you speak someone's name, you'll remember them, and you remember to take action for them. So say his name, and he's alive and well. We can still advocate. You can tell your family member, tell your cousin, tell your mama to sign on to this petition. We need as many signatures as possible. And thank y'all for tuning in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much for being here, and that event tomorrow is at 1 o'clock. It is in Dallas at 114 West Commerce Street. It is at the lynching of William Taylor's landmark. Like you said, that's 114 West Commerce Street. We will have some Linus folks in attendance, and I'm really excited for that. I'm sorry that Tunch and I won't be able to be there, but we do have some of our team will be there for sure. And Tunch, like 20 seconds. Anything else?
No, I'm just really thankful that you came tonight for such a heavy topic, but such an important one. So thank you for all your work, and we'll do the thing. We'll do the thing.
Yes, we will. Thanks so much. And we will be here back next week, Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. We are on the Recyard Women's Prison podcast. Make sure you're liking, following, commenting, all of those things. And we'll see you next week.
Peace.